everybody in Silicon Valley to readjust their procedures and processes and funding even?
Of course, it should be something that Silicon Valley should be afraid of or should be bothered about. Why have I said this? So imagine a situation where it costs China, according to the news they gave out, it cost China less than $6 million to launch DeepSeek. Meanwhile, their counterparts in the US, it cost them about $100 to $1 billion to launch that same system. And now DeepSeek is actually claiming
6 million to 100.
less than
That's
6
a lot.
million, about 5.58 million.
Is this something that is
dollars.
due to time or something? Maybe these guys are doing it cheaper because these people have set a record. They can use their research to do the work and all of that.
Okay, so I had this conversation with a couple of colleagues of mine today, and I said something which is quite salient, which I believe most business owners should take cognizance of. What is that, right? It is the fact that it's now a different ball game in the business world compared to about 2 decades or 3 decades ago.
Okay.
What do I mean by that? Before now, there used to be the first mover advantage in every business. The first guy who goes in gets a big chunk of the market and then leverages on that. Well, as we see today, with the advent of technology and, of course, artificial intelligence, we are now looking at a different dynamic. It's a dynamic shift, right? What do I mean by that? Now, you don't have to be the first mover to take a big chunk of the market. A new business can come in today and leapfrog and then beat whatever thing you've set. As we see today, DeepSeek, very funny, as you see today, DeepSeek is actually number 1 on Apple Store. That's quite
From
funny.
downloads?
Yeah, from downloads, number 1. All right, I think also when we're about to experience a different shift, a different dynamic. So even from the .com era, when we started adopting all of these things, right, we can see that semiconductors, I mean, the companies who do semiconductors, right, people like NVIDIA, AMD, and the likes, right, there's always a spike during this kind of news. And of course, right now, this is the all-time high. What people in the crypto space will call ATI, ATH rather, all-time high, right? So eventually, what we are experiencing right now is people building upon existing knowledge.
Okay.
You understand? So another thing is, I got to hear recently, I don't know how true that is, but I got to hear that Donald Trump recently signed out about over $500 billion to Sam Altman to build a new AI infrastructure for the United States.
Yeah, there were conversations around building a new AI infrastructure, but then the facts around the capital outlay were not so clear.
Even as we speak right now, the investors in OpenAI and the likes, right, are even beginning to watch what is happening in the stock exchange market. It's crashing. US is experiencing a downtime. I was listening to Valuetainment recently, and Patrick Bet-David was talking about how this thing is affecting, of course, the semiconductors, the people who provide semiconductors, the guys who provide cloud infrastructure. We are beginning to reevaluate. So I think what's going to happen eventually, the market is going to become very competitive, right? And what DeepSeek has done, just like the name DeepSeek. So when I hear DeepSeek, I'm thinking of Deep Blue Sea.
Yeah.
Why am I thinking of that? Because I was telling my colleagues today, I said, DeepSeek has done something which is quite remarkable. What's that? They've decided to tap into an untapped market space that has been there, but US guys did not see it because they were, just like Dami said, they had a monopoly. But now DeepSeek has done what is called, in strategy, it's called Blue Ocean strategy.
Blue Ocean strategy,
right?
yeah.
They've been able to tap into an untapped market space and create a new competition. So in the red ocean, please,
which is the certified, which is the circulated, where a lot of people are investing, everybody's ideas are there, and they're fighting for these limited resources.
It's limited resources. But now DeepSeek has created an entirely uncontested market space. And it's going to take a while my thoughts anyway, for Silicon Valley to adapt.
up.
Because just like Dami said, it will cost me $20 per month to use OpenAI's API, for example. And they charge me more when I'm using their API to process my own. For example, if I was to build an AI agent, it's going to cost me more to leverage on OpenAI, right? To be able to launch my stuff. But with DeepSeek, if I dummy, when I worked into the building today.
Okay.
When I walked into the building today, Dami told me something, which is because of I know I mentioned about particular LMS you're building, a smart learning management system, right? And immediately he had asked me, we are going to use OpenAI.
Yeah.
And immediately I stepped in, Dami said, Harry, we are not going to use OpenAI. I'm like, okay, I understand. DeepSeek is free.
Okay,
It's
so
cheaper.
let's look
Yeah.
at all of these monopolistic conversations that Silicon Valley had for the longest time, because it's a trend. We see that it's now a decentralized market. More people can come in, which means there are more opportunities.
Yeah.
And you touched on the fact that maybe even Nigeria can have their own, because I did some level of research this morning when I was thinking about this our conversation. Waking up and I see everybody writing about DeepSeek. America no longer has a monopoly. China is looking into this. There are always concerns about China's tendency to farm data and use it to, maybe do you in as a people. There's always that concern first. And then there is the concern that I read up on the OpenAI platform, the ChatGPT, when I typed DeepSeek and I wanted to learn more about that particular thing while I was going through the web. And it said DeepSeek, just digging deep, and then I said DeepSeek Chinese company, and it said, and then it wrote a more extensive research, and somewhere in that research that he wrote, it did a little bit of a demarketing. Now we need to go on a quick break. When we come back from this break, we'll be getting into the demarketing and some other things around strategy. We'll be right back.
Super FM 92.7.
back into the conversation where we're talking about the tech spaces, talking about the trends and the competitions that exist within the AI competitive scene. And we have started this conversation, of course. Damilola is here and we have Harrison here as well. Now, Harrison and Dami, before we went on the break, we established the fact that OpenAI was having a monopoly of the market. Silicon Valley had a monopoly of the market, but then the Chinese people have come up with a DeepSeek, which was spoken about a few years ago, and then launched and eventually became something that we're talking about right now, being number one on the download list on Apple as at today, because there's that competition. And since this monopoly has been broken, why can't we have this in Nigeria? Or maybe I'm even talking, I'm seeking a dream too large. Why can't we have this in Africa, in our tech space, where we say Nigeria has this ongoing in the tech spaces?
All right. So I would love to answer. That question was for me, right?
Yes.
So I'd love to answer.
It's to both of you.
As the biggest economy in the world, United States. Next to United States is China. I think China is doing about 17 billion, and United States about 20-something billion or $1 trillion. I can't remember.
Okay.
But around that figure, right?
Okay.
So if these two giants are competing, who are you to compete as a third world country? That's the first thing I want to say.
Okay.
All right. So I think United States is doing about 20-something billion, and China is doing about 17 billion.
We have a Dangote refinery that is doing 20 billion.
So let's not have that conversation.
This is a business that can actually set Africa on a massive stage, because there's a lot of information that is sourced from Africa. There are a lot of people, we've seen a lot of tech exports from Nigeria. When we talk about even the brightest minds that have from Nigeria built things that have changed the world. And I'm thinking that if that is a conversation, why can't the tech space in Nigeria and Africa champion that?
So I think I listened to Bosu Tijani, our current Minister of Digital Economy. He mentioned something about Nigeria building. So I was even with one of his special advisors, and we're having this conversation. And he said, in the space, what they are thinking, in the ministry, they're already thinking of building ChatGPT for Nigeria.
Which wouldn't be a bad thing.
All of Nigerian languages. Which is what, actually, that's what the first.
That would be a laudable thing, don't you think?
Yeah. That's one of the problems the first model of DeepSeek had. That's the DeepSeek R10, something like that.
Okay.
That's one of the problems it had. So basically, I think that's a laudable step to take. But then again, to compete, first and foremost, there is a dynamic that seems to play out in the tech ecosystem, which we are not paying attention to. Whether from the .com era to date, right? There's something that's been happening. It's always like United States or America, as the case may be,
sets the trend.
China makes it mainstream, and then Europe tries to,
make
regulate it.
Regulation.
Okay. Of course, that's where we have things like GDP. Of course, it was EU that made sure we had something like GDPR. That today Nigeria has NDPR. Right. So first and foremost, that's the dynamic at play. Now, if you're looking for an investor, who are you going to meet to get this investment?
Well, who did Dangote have to meet to get the investment?
World Bank, to build a department in World Bank. And these are the same people that want to probably fund a company in the US or fund a company in China. Do you think they want you to come and compete? First and foremost, this is how they see Nigeria. Nigeria is a third world country. Let's establish that fact.
Well,
maybe until we begin to have the right guys in leadership. Right, so I was saying something today. I said,
are we saying that? Okay, so
we have a leadership.
Are we saying that we don't have an environment that enables us to compete adequately in the tech space across Africa?
We have the best guys, actually.
We have the best guys when it comes to the minds. Because I'm talking to you both. We're seeing the trends. You've talked numbers and figures and research. You have talked research. You even talked about something that broke my heart. You said, if I have to play a game, and I need to connect to a server somewhere outside of Africa. And I'm thinking, and you said something that is quite daunting, because these are things that could bring development even faster than we know. See how much we've been able to do with tech in Nigeria in the last decade. I want us to look at that far.
Okay, I think that we should go, but I think we don't even have the infrastructure. I'll probably explain that later on.
Okay, so let's talk about it.
That we need.
The main problem is the infrastructure. Even if you're working with, let's say you're working with third-party services like MongoDB for your database, like you're working in tech, for instance. You don't see any server in Africa. You're connecting to servers in the US, you're connecting to servers in Europe. That priority has not been there. Like you said, it's not just Nigeria. I don't think it's a Nigerian problem. It's an African problem. And we need to say that, we have great minds. But that specific problem cuts across all sectors of life. In football, we have great Nigerian footballers, but they don't play for Nigeria. they go abroad and find greener pastures. It's the same thing. We have good talent. Yeah, that's like, there's no big deal about that. And it cuts across. So it's the same problem that we have here in tech. And that's why we see, there are a lot of startups now. In Lagos as we speak.
Yeah.
And they are trying to strive on their own. They have great ideas, great minds, and they have talented people.
Yeah.
But they don't have the backing and the funding, to push and achieve what they want to achieve. And this is at the granular level. So
how much of Silicon
about AI now?
Maybe
about,
facts. Yeah. How much of Silicon Valley is funded by the United States government? Do we have the facts? Because it seems as if we're saying that environment over there is conducive and that this industry is being backed by the government to the full extent.
So it's not just about the government backing them. It's about the government setting up systems that also back them. All right. I was having a conversation with one of the top executive directors of one of the very good tech companies we have. And we're having this conversation. I had to tell him that the reason why US or companies that are built in the US thrive faster than Africa is simply because, especially I just mentioned the US. US, they can bank on your dream. Of course, you have a bank in Nigeria, like Bank of Industry.
and the likes.
Are they really doing what they ought to do? That's another question you should ask.
Have you approached them to
of course,
have you approached them to say, oh, this is a dream I have, this is the passion I have, this is my financial investment, these are my postulations, these are the numbers that I think can come from this if we do this over the next 5 years?
I have. And just as you and I know that are Nigerians, there's a bit of nepotism that are going to that. But that's not what I want to talk about right now. I'm focusing on the fact that I'm not sure Nigerians or Nigeria has the infrastructure here to compete at that global level. First and foremost, let me explain to you what it takes to even get into the space of creating something like OpenAI or DeepSeek as the case may be. First and foremost, there are about 3 layers you have to go through.
Okay.
There are 3 levels of iterations. First and foremost, there are the guys who create semiconductors like AMD and the NVIDIA that I mentioned.
And we don't have any of those in Nigeria or Africa.
Please, do you want? I was going to give a very I don't know what very sarcastic response, but do you think we have not even solved the problem of power? They're talking about having semiconductors in Nigeria.
Is it impossible for us to do
It is not impossible. It is in fact, as a matter of fact, we have the manpower, we have the resources. I'm talking about the natural resources to actually do this. Well, of course, we all know the problem of Nigeria is very obvious. It's a fundamental problem that was passed down through leadership.
Okay.
You understand?
Wow.
So until that problem is sorted, you cannot even begin to compete with those guys. So I was talking about semiconductors.
Okay.
Above that layer are people who provide cloud infrastructure.
Okay.
I'm talking about AWS, Azure, GCP, and the likes,
okay.
right? Now, we don't even have a very standard data center. Just imagine what happened to the building at Zaria.
Yeah.
I don't know if you follow.
Center, conversation.
I think so. Bosun Tijani again came up with an idea to train about 3 million tech talents. They set up a hub to train these guys. And during the period, because of the way the government is being run, we went into a period of, I won't call it panic, I think it's a period we started protesting. What did the youths do? They destroyed something that was built already.
But that wasn't the fault of the government. Right?
Oh, well, if the government was leading properly, we wouldn't be having that kind of problem.
I want to say this, that as a matter of fact, one of the conversations we had at the time when that protest was ongoing, and we saw a lot of Nigerians destroying and breaking what taxpayers' money had put in place.
Yeah.
We had to do a campaign and speak about the fact that you destroying what your money put in place is not the way to go. Because if your taxpayers' money went into building that kind of infrastructure that is supposed to train 3 million tech entrepreneurs or minds, or talent, and that is something that you see the need to go and destroy. It isn't the fault of the government in that instance. It is your ignorance to getting the best of you, and it was something that we had to talk about extensively. But then I see the possibility, and that's why we're having this conversation in the tech trends and everything. I see the possibility that really very soon, and I want you to believe with me, that at some point, our little dreams and our from the confines of where we are, that is one of the reasons why Super FM and you and I have had this conversation for the longest time about tech spaces, is building the possibility of seeing the world come to us for the change we need to see, that Africa needs to see in the tech space. We need to be able to compete that actively. And I know it can happen.
Eventually, we may or may not get there. Because if I look at the grand scale of things, right, I don't think Nigeria has what it... So Nigerians
have what
it takes to compete. But Nigeria as a state or as a system, I don't think we have what it takes to compete.
Well,
right. So that's where I'll leave it.
I hope we get to where we can have what it takes to build a system that competes globally.
So what I think might happen, so this is my giveaway to our listeners. So I was talking about the 3 layers, right? I think those 3 layers are already taken. What Nigerian youths can now take advantage of, which I believe that's a low-hanging fruit, will be to build AI agents.